Opening our local newspaper was often cause for pain and embarrassment, as photographs of people we knew in handcuffs were all too common. Often these were images of black children and teenagers, infamously referred to as super predators in the 1990s by journalists and politicians, most notably Hillary Clinton. One of the most well-known and egregious examples was the use of visual media to portray the so-called Central Park Five, now known as the Exonerated Five. 5 Black and Latino teenage boys who were falsely accused and convicted of raping a white woman as a wolf pack. Such representations sparked fear and animus in the mainstream American public, especially among people distant from the communities living under the terror of aggressive policing and imprisonment, but also among some people who lived in those neighborhoods. At the same time, there were other images being produced about mass incarceration, images that rarely made the news and had little or no public circulation. They offered different narratives of prisons and their impact. These were not journalistic, scholarly, or legal documents. They were a diverse assortment of artworks and illustrations coming from prison. Studio photos, handmade greeting cards, drawings, and other pieces of art made by incarcerated people. Incarcerated relatives sent home graphite drawings and birthday cards designed by artists in prison. In some prisons, we could take photographs together when we visited our relatives and friends. The visiting rooms where we sat with our imprisoned relatives and friends often displayed paintings, miniatures, and sculptures made by incarcerated people. These objects were not new forms of prison art, but as the size of the prison population boomed, the visual culture of mass incarceration grew along with it. I started working on this book as a way to deal with the grief about so many of my relatives, neighbors, and childhood friends who were spending years, decades, or life sentences in prison. It was also an effort to connect with others who were separated from their loved ones by prisons, parole, policed streets, and other forms of institutional and quotidian violence. I began by displaying photos of incarcerated relatives around my apartment, partly as an attempt to work through my own discomfort with the pictures of them in prison, and to bring their presence into my daily life. Then in 2012, Kara Bramson, a former student who at the time was working at the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey, invited me to give a presentation as part of the center's public engagement program. It was the first time that I had talked publicly about my incarcerated relatives and the visual records of their incarceration. Family photos, cards, drawings, and paintings on bedsheets. I had been mulling over doing a project on visuality and prisons, but was afraid that it would be too emotionally challenging for my family and me. But after that first presentation, something unexpected happened. Something that would continue to happen over the years of lecturing and doing research on prison art. People came up to me afterward to describe how they were directly impacted by prisons, how they had been incarcerated themselves or had loved ones in prison, and about the shame and emotional difficulty of talking about these experiences in public. Some shared photos and art that came from prison. This is how the project grew, by word of mouth and connecting with others. I started speaking more frequently at universities, nonprofit centers, and art institutions, and gatherings that were often emotionally loaded for the audiences and for me. Afterward, others would share, often bringing in examples of art made in prison. College students at elite institutions would reveal to me that they had incarcerated relatives back home. The work that I was doing affected my relationships and conversations with family members, too. My incarcerated relatives put me in touch with artists, and family members outside of prison sent me some of their photographs and artwork. Through these experiences, I began to build community.